Okay. Hello? Yes, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started with our committee. This is the State and Local Subcommittee of House Governmental Affairs. Appreciate everybody's accommodation of our delayed schedule. Things got pushed back a little bit today. So we're going to go ahead and begin, and I'll ask Chairman Jay Collins, if he will, to take us to the Lord in prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will you bow your heads? Our most gracious, kind Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity today to come together to look after the business of the people of this great state. We ask that you would be with us as we make the important decisions, that once those decisions are made, that we remain friends and cordial as we continue out through the rest of this day. We ask you to bless this meeting and be with those who are in attendance. In your name we humbly pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. We have 4 bills on the agenda today. We're going to start with House Bill 1149, Representative Maynor. I gave her the option to present from here. She said she prefer to present from the podium. So, Representative Maynor, go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. This bill, thank you for allowing me to present. This bill actually has been on the books for several years. It has been refined over the past several years. I'm going to try to make this as short as possible since we have a full house with several bills coming up. In a nutshell, our constitutional officers have access to discretionary funds that are not being reported. This bill simply says that all discretionary funds must be reported. You may be asking yourself, well, what are the discretionary funds? It could be the calls from the jail. It could be the commissary funds. It could be the fees from the passport office. It could be a number of different fees throughout the county. What has currently been happening in the past is these discretionary funds will end up being supplemental to the officer's salary. And so really this bill was also vetted by ACCG. They corrected some of the language to make it be more practical. I had some county commissioners look at this bill, and right now the reason we changed the previous version that we had is because even though the bill says that you are required to submit your audit of the discretionary funds, if you do not currently do auditing of discretionary funds, then your thought would be, if you're this constitutional officer, then your thought would be, well, we're not currently doing it, so we don't have an audit to submit, so we're not going to submit it. This bill says you must do an audit and you must submit it to the county. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take some.
Okay, thank you, Representative Maynor, and we have a couple of questions. Representative Anulowicz.
Thank you. With regards to, because you mentioned the clerks, and that has been definitely an issue in Cobb County where I live, but one of the things that I understand is that those, specifically the passport funds that are collected as discretionary funds, whoever it is, the clerk, whomever it is in whatever county, they actually have to report that income as personal income to the IRS. How does this impact that?
Well, right now, if they are reporting the income as personal income, they're reporting that to the IRS, but the state and the county has no idea because they don't have to report that currently.
So the counties don't know the amount?
The counties do not know the amount.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who are the local constitutional officers?
It could be the probate judges, the sheriffs, the tax commissioners. Who am I missing, Stuart? Sheriffs, clerks. Did I miss anyone? Okay, I got them all. And each of those constitutional officers has access to discretionary funds that the county has no idea what they are. How much is being collected, I should say.
Okay. Does that satisfy your question, Representative Brown?
I have one more since she said that. So once they report in the audit, their discretionary funds, then what happens?
Then that is a great step in the right direction. That is what this bill is trying to do. The county should know how much income or revenue is being generated through discretionary funds, and currently, right now, they do not know.
But the county will not have any authority to tell them what to use the money for, right?
The county commissioners tell the department how to use revenue, but you're correct. When it comes to these discretionary funds, if they want to use the discretionary funds as personal income, this bill does not change that. This bill is saying we just want to know what the funds are.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Collins.
Help me out here. I know that they're reporting that to to the county. Is there anywhere that says that's going to be made available to the public?
That is not in here. So currently, well, I guess technically, audits are public. The county audits go to the state auditing office, but the discretionary funds are not a part of the current audit. This adds discretionary funds to the current audit.
Okay. One more follow-up question, if I may. And this is done because some of these discretionary funds in some of these counties probably make up more than what the base salary is for those constitutional officers. Is that correct?
That is correct. For example, some clerks may make almost $500,000 a year when you're adding these discretionary funds on top of their salary.
And another follow-up question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your willingness to let me ask another question. And so this is just a transparency piece that we're wanting to put out there. In other words, is that correct?
This is a transparency bill, and ACCG is in support of the bill. They would like to know.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And final question, we'll recognize Chairman Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to Chairman Collins's point, currently these funds are not subject to any audit requirement and are not being disclosed publicly. Is that correct? Your bill would seek to at least make that part of the audit process so that the existence of the funds and the amount of them would be disclosed within the course of the audit, correct?
Yes.
And the audit is a publicly available document.
Yes.
Right. And a lot of local governments, in my experience, actually receive a presentation from the auditor to review the audit and ask questions in that public forum of the auditor about different components of the audit. Is that right?
All except the discretionary funds, because they're not there.
Well, right now, they wouldn't, but your bill would make that more subject to sort of sunshine, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple more lights lit up. We're going to end this at these last two questions because we have a lot of people sign up to speak to other bills. So, Representative Nolowitz.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to clarify, this information is public. You just have to submit an open records request for it if you want to get that information. And so this is the intent to, and that's a statement, like these are already public. Anybody can they can FOIA anything. But this, and that's how people have found out in the past, I think, how much money some of these clerks make, for example, from passport fees. What this would do is have it be part of that regular audit. The information is publicly accessible, but only for those who go through the process of accessing it.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you. It's there, it's public, but this makes it more accessible.
Makes it much more accessible.
Representative Burnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one final question. How would the public know that these audits were available? Because I know that there are some of these local constitutional officers who have a lot of money, but they don't really know that they do. So how would they find out? And because is this really going to make a difference? You have a great question, and that is the purpose of the bill. So now, since they will be required to report it
in their audit to the county when, as Representative Anulowicz said, when they present the departmental audit to the county at the county commission meeting, then it makes it much more accessible to the public, so the public then will know what those funds are.
Thank you.
Okay, Chairwoman Taylor?
At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, have no other lights flashing. We do have one other speaker to the bill, so signed up on the sign-up sheet. So I'll recognize you in just a moment. At this time, thank you, Representative. I'd like to call Mr. Todd Edwards with ACCG to come to the podium. And Mr. Edwards, proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, Todd Edwards with ACCG. I'll be very quick. I did speak with Representative Manor today. I had not seen the substitute. Our original concerns were that county commissioners, this is required of them in their audit. If they don't give it to us, we can't include it, then we might face penalties. That's the county governing authority. I trust that's been addressed. If not, I'll continue working with Representative Mayer through the legislative process. Counties set the budget. I want to be clear for constitutional officers. We do not control it once it is set, nor do we have necessary authority over it. But that's just some cleanup language that was in the original bill. I'll take a look at this. I know she's been working hard on it. We're in support of the concept, but should those concerns not be addressed, I will continue to work with the representative throughout the process should this bill advance.
Okay, Mr. Edwards, if you don't mind, we have a question, I believe, from Representative Maynor.
Thank you, Chair. Not necessarily a question. So Mr. Edwards brought his last concerns to me, and the committee now has the new substitute that includes the language that I talked to Mr. Edwards about. So
There is the word cooperation. I see that, and forgive me for looking at that. We'd be happy to work should anything else come up, but we appreciate her bringing the bill forward. And it does address some of the passport fee issues that we've been trying to get transparency on for some time up here, unsuccessfully thus far with the General Assembly, I might add. And those are fees as personal compensation. There's only 3 in government. The other ones, the fees that were mentioned by Representative Maynor are not spent as personal compensation by the constitutional officers other than the passport fees, vital records fees, and tax commissioner fees for collecting city taxes. I didn't want it to be thought that these were actually being pocketed by the other ones by the county commissioners. Those are the only 3 that we know of. This remains within their office for office purposes.
Yes, sir. And one final question, I believe, for the presenter, Chairman Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to touch on an issue that's been discussed, this would sort of mandate disclosure to the counties of the existence and extent of these funds. And to your point, you can't mandate that the constitutional officer do anything with it, but you can take that into consideration for the next budgeting year, obviously.
On the first part of that question, I trust the revised language does. On the second part of the questions, that's correct. It stays within their authority.
Okay, thank you.
And it would be transparency purposes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate it. No more questions. At this time, I would entertain a motion.
I move do pass.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. It's going on to full committee, which will meet tomorrow, so this will be, Representative, this will be eligible to be called up in full committee at the chairman's discretion. We have 3 other bills. One of those is a bill I am carrying, and we're trying to locate the other 2 presenters just to see if they're going to be here to present. If not, then I'll ask my colleague, Chairman Leverett, to take over the microphone. And we may go ahead and do that because I know, is Chairman Smith here? I know he was presenting in another committee as of a few minutes ago. So. Right. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, what I will do is I will turn the microphone, and you want to just preside from there, sure, Rob? To Chairman Leverett, who will preside over the meeting while I present my bill, or the bill I am carrying, which is House Bill 1253. Chairman Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I trust you would like to make a presentation with regard to 1253, and we'll go ahead and let that happen now, and then we can take subsequent testimony. I think you said there's some folks coming, so we'll go ahead and do that now if you want to go ahead and speak to your bill.
Okay, sir, and with your agreement, I'll just present from my seat.
Absolutely.
All right. Committee, I bring to you House Bill 1253. This is a bill that is quite honestly, it's not a bill that I created or drafted. This is what I call a legacy bill. The bill is actually in two parts. The original part of this bill was, or at least the first draft of it, was drafted by someone I never had the pleasure to serve with. However, my colleagues who have and the people I've spoken with have spoken very highly of our former Rules Chairman, former Ways and Means Chairman, and former outstanding attorney from South Georgia who really loved rural Georgia, Chairman Jay Powell. This bill was drafted at the time when he was co-chair of our Rural Development Council, and was currently asked for by the current co-chairs and vice chair of the Rural Development Council. However, we've gone through and worked some of the original language to make it a little more amenable to current situations and to everyone that's involved. That's the original part of this bill, which is actually Section 2 of the bill. Section 1 is an addition that, working with Chairlady Lynn Smith, we've added to address a concern from our smaller counties and smaller communities. And again, this is a topic and a subject that she had numerous discussions with our most recent former Rules Chairman, Chairman Richard Smith. So everything involved with this bill is, I call it a legacy bill, but it's almost like it's a memorial to some of our great leaders in this state of Georgia. So I'll just very quickly go through the bill, and I will tell you there is a possibility there may be one more sub between now and full committee. However, this is pretty close to a final version. I'll thank Legislative Counsel Stuart Morelli for not refusing to accept my emails this morning as we were bouncing thoughts and ideas back and forth and getting changes to this bill. Section 1 addresses, and everybody's had an opportunity to look at this that's seen the version online, I'm sure. Section 1 addresses a concern, and Chairlady Smith just stepped in, so I'll let her speak to this section in just a moment, but I just kind of as a brief introduction, this is the incorporation of a bill that Chairlady Smith actually brought to this subcommittee just a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was, to address some of our smaller counties, smaller communities that have difficulty meeting the required service needs and that sort of thing in the state of Georgia. Chairlady Smith, Mr. Chairman, and I'm operating as a presenter at this point. Chairman Leverett is presiding over the meeting. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to ask Chairlady Smith to take the podium.
Absolutely. Oh, there she is.
So good afternoon, everyone. And somewhere in this folder I have the bill. So let's see, we're doing House Bill 1253, and your committee has the full amended version of the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. We're let me clarify that. We are working from LC 472913S.
Okay, thank you, because that's different than what I have. So thank you very much. And same? Okay. Thank you, sir. So, catch my breath. First of all, I can't thank you enough for your time and your input. Several of you gave me some information. We're dealing about what I call the forgotten part of Georgia, the areas that used to be farming, used to have population. This part of the bill is more micro governing as opposed to the macro that we're looking at for the regional councils. And this bill specifically deals with certain areas of rural Georgia. And I even had our local government community give me some information too on what we need to do. But in this bill, Sorry, y'all. I had somebody come to my committee to deal with another problem. And let me try and find out. Are we still in the first part of the bill? Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So the best thing to do is just read the intro to this. The General Assembly finds that there are numerous rural counties in this state that do not have financial resources sufficient to provide all the services needed by their residents. In order to promote the health, prosperity, and general welfare of the residents in such counties, a new category of district titled Special Rural District shall be created, and such districts shall be eligible to seek out the state and federal funds described Chapter 10, Title 44, and such other funds as they become available. What prompted all of this was I'm an ex officio member of the Rural Council, and when we were there, we were looking at all the different problems of our rural counties that are off the mainline connection with the state. And what gave me the basis for this idea, and I'll just go back over it again briefly, is in my county, my local government, Coweta County government, has five commissioners, and the commissioners rotate their chairmanship every 2 years. That does not, in a way, enable any one particular commissioner to have less or more power than the others. And so when I was looking at how to help our rural counties, one of the biggest problems with our rural counties is they don't have the resources at all to file their reports. They don't have what they need to conduct their business, and they are struggling in ways that we can't even imagine. I was surprised when a staff person with Environmental Protection Division says we have to help them do the reports that they send to us. So it's a crisis in our community, but because it has declining population and increasing poverty, their voices are not heard. So this is a bill that I presented to former Chair Richard Smith, and he loved this concept of what was going on. So it's essentially what I presented to you before. It's just been amended to this. It talks about how do you define somebody who qualifies. First of all, the counties have to be contiguous, touching. And the first part of that language, I'm now on line 27, page 2. It talks about how the counties get connected to be eligible. So it's 3 or more. And this is all going to work through the Department of Community Affairs. But the criteria to be a candidate for this consideration, they have to have 3 previous consecutive years of a declining population, and also declining revenue. And what they do is they enter, in a way where I'm asking them, or if we pass this part of the bill, we're asking them to form an alliance. We're not requiring that anything happen here, but if it is the will of these particular counties to unite, to form this alliance, then this alliance and this formation means that they agree to an administrator who has the skill sets and the knowledge and the ability to help them run their governments. That's essentially what it does in a nutshell. We move on down and explains how the governing board works, and one of the things I was concerned about is if your counties lose a commissioner, so it's a new commissioner joining the board, that doesn't take that county out of the rotation of chairmanships. I thought it more important to protect the value and the voice of each individual county, even though the representative might change. So it keeps the rotation going. The benefit is, if they do this, working through the Department of Community Affairs, then they can qualify for the funds they need. These counties do not have the revenue or the money or the ability to pull down any state or federal funds. So what is happening is this situation is just rewarding more and more poverty. And back to my game of Red Rover, if you have Georgia's blossoming and all over the state, but if you've got a weak link, you break our line. And this is one way of trying to strengthen the weaker links in here. I also want to draw to this committee's attention that we do not have any bigger champion than Governor Kemp for everything he's done for rural Georgia. I think this could be another tool in the toolbox. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for giving me a chance to catch my breath.
Thank you, Chair Lady Smith, and Chairman Leverett. With with your permission, I'd like to ask Chair Lady Smith to just avail herself for questions in just a moment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And I'll kind of take from there and talk about Section 2 of the bill. Section 2 is what the bill originally started as. And again, this has been a work in progress up until literally just less than an hour or so ago. What we are doing is looking at revising the makeup of our regional commissions and the authority, the governing boards for our regional commissions. There are 12 regional commissions in the state of Georgia, and they have functioned very well in many cases, and in some cases have needed a little assistance. I know some have assisted others, and so what we're looking at is the structure of that and making some changes, and then kind of reverting back to the way things are now from the original version of this bill. That sounds a little complicated, but basically, currently, the regional commission is made up of the chief elected official of each county in the commission or his designee. Then it's also made up of the one municipal chief elected official or designee from each county, which would be a city mayor or their designee, and typically. It's made up of 3 non-elected officials that are appointed by the governor, one of those being the chair of a board of education in the commission. Then there's also an appointment by the Speaker of the House and an appointment by the Lieutenant Governor for each of the commissions. Where we're getting to with this bill and where we've gotten to at this point, we really haven't changed a lot as far as the chief elected official of the county, which will be the county commissioner. We've pretty much gone back to the original language with that. In some cases, the original bill said that the chair of the county commission shall serve and did not give any other options. There are counties like my own where the chair is elected from the body of the commission by the commission itself and elected every year. So those in some counties work on a rotational basis. So that could be an annual turnover in some of those positions, and you lose some institutional knowledge, you lose some ability to kind of function as you would normally want to. So we've made that change kind of back to the original language. As far as how the municipal appointee is made, we've gone to a system working with our friends at GMA and taking some suggestions they've had. We've gone to a system that would allow them to caucus the chief elected municipal officials in the commission every fall to elect amongst themselves the representatives, one representative to correspond to each county in the commission to serve on the commission for that 2-year term. So that is a change from the current law and the current way that's done. The next change that we had, the original bill, Chairman Powell's bill, basically allowed all the rest of the appointments through the governor's office. We're working with that language now, and that's why I said there's a possibility there may be one additional sub between here and full committee. However, we have left some of the original language in, calling for the governor's office to appoint one non-elected member to the commission per county in the commission. So, and then at least two of those have to be chairman of boards of education. So that's a bit of a change from where it is now. And then we put back in the language that allowed an appointment by the speaker and an appointment by the lieutenant governor. Probably the biggest change in this, other than the tweaks we're making to the makeup of the commission leadership, is the requirement for training. We are requiring that within 6 months of taking the position on the board, that each member go through an approved training program. There is a provision to allow for an extension of that 6 months should that be necessary. With that, Chairman Leverett, I will turn it back to you, because that's pretty much the basis of this bill as it stands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does anyone on the committee have any questions of the chairman? We got one line over there, if you'll hit it.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, looking at section, on the bottom of page 4, section B1, it looks like, is it accurate to say that everybody, all members serving on a council, Council of Regional Commission as of July 1 of this year, will serve until the end of the year, and then all of them will end? So every person who's currently on a regional commission their terms will end?
That is
All at the same time?
That is correct. Now, there's nothing to say that those members aren't going to be reappointed, because during this time process, assuming this bill is authorized, then the reappointment process will be ongoing. But basically that is the term. That's the change date from the old method of appointment to the new method.
Yeah, it just seems like a pretty huge sweep and turnover kind of all at one time. And you could conceivably lose a lot of institutional knowledge. But anyway, that just kind of struck me as, I don't know, a little bit worrisome. Thank you.
Well, and I share your concern on that, but we're also, there is nothing in this that eliminates anyone who is currently serving in those seats from being considered for reappointment in those seats, and the appointment mechanism is basically the same, with the exception of the municipalities electing their own representatives. So there's the possibility of a one-time complete fruit basket turnover, if you will, is very, very minimal.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned the municipalities. I'm sort of confused. So how are we changing representation of the municipalities in these regional commissions?
The biggest change with this change in the bill is, instead of having one municipality from each county appointed to the commission, we're allowing a caucus of all of the municipalities in the commission to appoint a number equal to the number of counties. They would basically be appointing their own.
So does that possibly mean that municipalities would have less power and influence in this process?
Actually, they would, by being able to appoint their own members, they would actually have more control over the process. The total number of municipal elected officials will be the same.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out logistically how that would affect, say, Cobb, Marietta and Mableton and Cobb, which are our two big cities. I don't quite, anyway. All right.
I do know that there are some representatives from GMA signed up to speak a little later.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thank you.
they may be able to
That would
answer that
help.
question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions of the chairman? All right, I don't believe there are any. Mr. Chairman, would you like to proceed to any witnesses at this time?
Yes, please.
Okay. Who do we have signed up? Oh, well, speaking of GMA, and they shall appear, is Jim Thornton here? And Jim, I did not mean to refer to you as the devil by that.
No, thank you.
Just
No offense taken,
clear,
Mr. Chairman.
that's right.
So thank you, Jim Thornton with GMA, and appreciate Chairman Anderson working with us on trying to improve this bill. I think I have the latest sub, which y'all have in front of you, 13S. Is that the? Yeah, 2913S. So. Yes, appreciate the concern and the discussion. Our interest is very limited, and it's very focused at GMA, and that is on lines 101 through 112 or so, beginning where you talk about the method of appointment of the elected officials from municipalities. Under current law, there is an equal number of representatives of cities and counties on the commission. It's basically a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 representation. 1/3 county officials, 1/3 city officials, 1/3 private citizens. In my prior role as mayor of LaGrange, I chaired our regional commission, and it works well. I think the issues that we have with this bill, Mr. Chairman, and we'll continue to work with Chairman Anderson, is that under the way the substitute is currently worded, this would require mayors to serve. And I think that there are many instances, just like with county commission chairs, where it's because most mayors are part-time positions, they have other jobs. Typically, when they run for mayor, they know when the city council meetings are going to be. They don't necessarily block out time on their calendar with their employer for regional commission meetings, et cetera. And so sometimes they need to have a city council member serve. So one of the suggestions that we have shared with Chairman Anderson is that in line 101, rather than requiring a number of chief elected officials equal to the number of counties, that we just require a number of elected officials. So just to literally delete the word chief in line 101, and then skipping on down to line 103, under the provision that each county have a municipal representation, deleting a chief. So it would, in 103, we shall have I guess it would need to be an elected official of a municipality. So that's one suggestion we would have for the committee to consider, particularly if there's going to be consideration of a new sub. I understand the desire to have the chief elected official serve on the regional commission, but I think in some of our smaller cities and some of our more rural communities, that may become impractical to have. And then the final suggestion is on lines 104 through 106. The process that's outlined here is very similar to what we discussed with Chairman Anderson offline, of having a caucus of all, and here I think it makes sense to have it be the chief elected officials. The mayors would be the ones who could caucus and make the election. But rather than it being in line 104 a nomination, I think we would like to see that that provision would be such officials shall be elected by a caucus of all the chief elected officials of the municipalities within the region, period, rather than involving a nomination process from the elected officials, then an election by the department, which would be the Department of Community Affairs. That seems to be an unnecessary step. We support the idea of clarifying the representation on the regional commission. Certainly, they do a great job for our cities. But our concern is to make sure that our city officials can choose their representatives, that they have one representative from each county. I think that makes sense, and I would certainly take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Thornton? We do have one, Representative Brunel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You were mentioning about the mayors and their schedules. So would this be a paid position for whoever was the representative?
So they're not paid positions. I do think some of the regional commissions provide a per diem on a per meeting basis. That I don't know that that's true across the board. The Three Rivers Regional Commission does have a per diem, but certainly it's more of a scheduling issue. I know when I chaired the Three Rivers Commission, we oftentimes were fighting to get a quorum because we had a lot of mayors and commissioners who were not able to attend for one reason. You really want to, I think, have people who are eager to serve, willing to make that time commitment to make sure that you do have a quorum present.
So Zoom is not an option?
No, Zoom is not an option.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further questions? I do have one down there. Representative Williams.
Yes, so you mentioned the composition, a third, a third, a third. Does it remain a third, a third, a third under this bill?
It does remain a third, a third, a third, and each county would have a county official as well as a municipal official representing the county.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Okay.
There are any at this point. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and we have next to speak is Laura Mathis and Eric Wilson with the Association of Regional Commissioners. Is this going to be a 2-for-1 situation here?
It is.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Laura Mathis. I currently serve as the president of the Georgia Association of Regional Commissions.
I'm Eric Wilson. I'm the mayor of the city of Forsyth, and I serve as the chairman of the Georgia Association of Regional Commissions. Thank you for having us today.
Thank y'all for being here.
Wanted to just take a few minutes. We have shared some concerns from the state association regarding Section 2 of the Substitute Bill 2913S. One concern is regarding how quickly this change would occur. In some cases, you have officers that have just been elected and taken office in January, and this would have them where they were scheduled to serve a 2-year term and have been groomed to serve in a leadership capacity. There's no guarantee that they would be reappointed to the council. And natural turnover happens on a regional commission council through election processes and through appointments of our non-public members. But it just seems like the time frame for implementation is a bit too speedy in order to maintain continuity of operations. We applaud the fact that there's been a change to allow on the county side a county commission chair or their designee. In our region, we do have some rotating chairs, and in most cases, counties allow that same member to serve for all 4 years of their term in office, but that's not always the case. We also realized that there was no provision in the legislation to make sure that consolidated or unified governments have the same representation on the Regional Commission Council as a local government that has multiple cities and a county. Under the current provision of a third, that last third, so 1/3 county officials, 1/3 municipal officials, and 1/3 non-public, those non-public members today are appointed by the city and the county. Under the proposed legislation, I believe that appointment of the non-public member goes to the governor. And in reference to the municipal members, the mayor had some concerns that we wanted to make sure and express.
Yeah, so I think Jim hit most of our concerns, but I do have some additional concerns to those expressed by Jim. One is we're concerned about the regional caucus. Right now, the municipal representative is selected from within the county. So a county caucus of municipal chief elected officials chooses which one will serve to represent that county. And this bill would allow the region to select one from each county. So I realize we still get one from each county, but we think government closest to the people works best for the people. And if you let those folks in the county caucus select their own, we think we would be better served there. And then we agree about having the redundant step of having the Department of Community Affairs be the one to finally appoint. So we would nominate from the caucus, whether it be regional or county, and then the final appointment would come from the Department of Community Affairs. There again, we think that it should be a decision that's made locally within the county delegations that represent and make up the regional commission. So those would be two of our big concerns and reasons for concern about the bill.
We appreciate the fact that in this current version, 2913S, that the lieutenant governor and the speaker of the House appointments were reinstated as they are in current law. In fact, in Middle Georgia, our current chairman is a lieutenant governor's appointment, and we are thrilled to have him serve as our chair. The one concern regarding the number of appointments that the governor would need to make, that's almost multiplying it ×5 over the current appointments, and we do have some regional commissions who have struggled to maintain having appointments in all of the state positions on the Regional Commission Council, sometimes causing a quorum issues with quorum because they do count towards quorum and are full voting members. The last concern is regarding the provision in the law, in the proposed bill, regarding training being provided by DCA, and specifically the topics that are enumerated. Each regional commission does provide orientation and training for council members, which allows us the opportunity to talk about the history of the organization, really dive deep into the financial matters of the organization and the unique services that are provided by each regional commission. Also allows us to talk about the role of council and how we're engaged and how our committees are structured, and also to highlight the unique characteristics of the region. The items that are enumerated for training by the Department of Community Affairs, at least in my 17 years of experience with the Regional Commission, have not been matters that have come before the Regional Commission Council. So you may consider removing some specific topics if the provision for DCA training remains in effect. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of these two witnesses?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I was just going to say, I know y'all have provided through your representation some suggestions to me, but if as far as the training side of it, if y'all can provide me some specific recommendations to what you would like there, I would like to see if we can incorporate some of that in that. So.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't believe we see any. Thank y'all so much for your testimony today. we have anybody else to testify? I believe that's all the witnesses we have, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Chairman Levitt, if we may open up to any questions that may be on the part of the committee or related to the Section 1 that Lynn Smith, Chairman Lady Smith's section.
Okay, sure. Any questions on anything on the bill? Representative Williams?
So, is there someone here from the Department of Community Affairs? I can't, okay, hello. So my question is, what kind of training is currently available for some of, I understand Chairman Smith's concerns about some of the smaller counties and their struggles with some of these duties. Is there currently training from DCA, and do you have any kind of comment on your role in this newly proposed structure?
I think the chair will now subpoena Representative DCA to testify.
Thank you for the subpoena, I guess. Which section specifically would you be referring to, Section 1 or Section 2?
And would you also just state your name? We know who you
sorry.
are, but if you just for our at-home audience viewing.
Sure. Rusty Haygood with the Department of Community Affairs. Section 1. In Section 1, currently DCA does not provide training associated with any of the topics there. We do provide technical assistance in a number of different areas to communities all around the state. Everything from grant writing to historic preservation to planning to downtown development, you name it. But specific to this bill, there would not be.
So, my question is, help me if I'm getting it wrong, Chairman Smith, but I think Chairman Smith is looking for more hands-on help from DCA with some of the executive tasks that these smaller counties have. Is that something that you're not doing right now? I mean, I'm not really familiar with what DCA is doing currently to assist a struggling smaller rural county. I mean, what's available if they are struggling and are having the kind of concerns that Chairman Smith has brought before us?
Specifically at this point in time, we are responding to those inquiries and those requests. Many times those are going to be where the needs of the community are intersecting the specific programs that DCA does have that we do offer. And those could be many and varied, but DCA does not have expertise in budgeting that we can come in and provide assistance with. We don't have expertise in legal matters that we could come in and assist. It's really, for instance, if you have a municipality that has a downtown issue that could have our Office of Downtown Development come in and provide assistance, that's where we would be interfacing with the communities. They reach out to one of our 12 regional representatives on a regular basis, and that's the liaison between the community and all the resources at our central office.
So does DCA have a position on Section 1 of this bill?
Our only position would be if there are additional tasks and responsibilities that the legislature is asking of us, we would request funding to undertake whatever those are with specific ideas about what the legislature thinks are needed.
Do we have a question, Representative Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one question. I know that we're talking about cities, but I know a friend of mine lives in a county that will be considered, I guess, a small county, and they call, instead of the city, they call them commissioners. So would they qualify for this program? I guess, Chairman Smith.
So Repeat that to me again, please.
There's some counties, I thought her county had like cities. It's a city, but they only are governed by commissioners like counties. They don't have mayor or anything like that. So would they qualify for this grant also?
So there would be conditions met, and that's where, first of all, there has to be an agreement of at least 3 contiguous counties. Once they form that agreement, they have to apply and make application through DCA and get approved by that. There's a pilot program section to this bill, which might answer your question, and I think would also bring up other things that we might have to look at to file. But on line 59, the Department of Community Affairs will undertake a pilot program through which up to 3 special rural districts may be created in the state. And then once that is completed, with those issues resolved, we will know where some of the problems are, and it will be a process. But I can't speak for DCA, but I don't imagine them wanting to actually help us govern any which way or form that they have to, because their role is advice and to help. I don't want to speak for you, sir, but their role is to advise us. The problem with our smaller counties, and they are in a way like a city in that sense that they do the governing, they don't have the resources or the talent. They're barely surviving. So it's describing more of a dire situation. But this type of process does go through DCA. And we had a casual conversation on the steps that it was a good idea, but this has to be flushed out even more. And that's the beauty and the value of the pilot program. Overall, all of our governments, was on government committee for years, way back when, but our elected officials are the ones who make the determination for us. What these small counties do not have is an administrator to facilitate or to take care of the issues. They might have a part-time person who comes in. They just don't have the resources. And my biggest fear as the state, as we grow and our population emerges from our more denser parts of the state, then we're going to have a whole section, like a donut hole in our state, if we don't consider them as much as we consider our larger cities and counties. Where I live now, most of my cities, my county, have phenomenal executive administrators, and the elected officials are very responsive. But you have people fleeing these counties. Other state agencies are having to help them fill out some of the reports. It's something we don't see in the world in which we live, but I have witnessed it a lot traveling with the Rural Council and seeing that firsthand. So I guess we could say I'm also just placating and begging the DCA as a wonderful resource for our county. I've worked with them for years, and that's their purpose. But we will get guidance as they would guide anybody on an initiative like this, if it's the will of the body.
So it's kind of like the person would be like the city manager?
Yeah, if you're trying to think of a minister for a county, he can't make the decisions, but he has to have the skill sets to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I don't believe I see any over there, Mr. Chairman. So what is the chair desired of hearing only today? Okay. Okay, all right, so this was just a hearing only today. So, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Leverett. And committee, thank you for the good questions and those who presented and discussed today. We're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. All right, I've been asked to actually move up House Bill 1266. Representative Washburn. Representative, you may proceed at your discretion, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Representative Spencer Fry to join me here, if that's okay with you.
Yes, sir.
And I'll explain the reason for that in a moment. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we are pleased today to present House Bill 1266. Before we do that, I think some background is in order. As you know, I think we all agree that we have a shortage of housing in our state, especially a shortage of what we would call entry-level housing. I'm a deep believer that the path to financial stability and the building of any kind of wealth for our working families in Georgia generally involves home ownership, and we all know how that works. We all have to pay for shelter. And so if you're fortunate enough to buy a home, the process of the appreciation and value of that home and the paying down of the debt on it creates equity, which for most Georgia families is an important piece of that financial stability. We do have a shortage. We have worked to try to address that, to create more housing. And so as of the end of last year, with what we had tried not being successful, there was a working group formed that I was not part of. I applauded their efforts. It was the Georgia Municipal Association, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Home Builders Association, the Georgia Association of Realtors, Habitat for Humanity, and I believe the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia was involved in the work that was done. They worked for the whole year, and I believe I'm correct. They had 4 meetings of different areas of the state, and they involved their working group. They invited people in, and they did a lot of good work. My good friend Representative Spencer Fry had an idea, and he took it to them, and that was the forming of this bill, which is the Choice Act. Spencer Fry is my good friend, and he's my strong ally in this belief that we need to do something to make housing, entry-level housing in particular, more affordable in Georgia. And so that is why I've asked Spencer to join me here. He is the expert on this bill. He did most of the work, and I give him the credit for doing that work. I am honored to have been asked to carry the bill. So simply stated, I'm going to give you some very broad strokes about the bill. What it does is create incentives for our local governments and some different tiers, and I will let Spencer speak to the bill. But it gives incentives. It doesn't force anybody to do anything. It gives them incentives to do that. Now, we all know, those of us that are in this business, and by the way, I don't build any houses anymore. I used to. I grew up building houses, and me and my brother built a few houses just maybe 15 years ago. But I don't have a checkbook in this fight. I'm not out to build any houses. So my interest is what I deeply believe is good for our state. This bill creates incentives. It doesn't force anybody to do anything. And they can choose different tiers and different participation. And we believe it incentivizes our local governments to make some changes that will help us with affordability. There are 2 primary things that will increase affordability. One is density. We need to build more houses on less land. And the secret to that is infrastructure with water and sewer. And if we'll just let the free market work and provide the smaller lots for folks to build on, then they will probably do that and the cost will be less. We should certainly point out no one is suggesting that a private developer couldn't have larger lots in a development if he wants to. But one of the secrets to reducing housing costs is increasing the density. The other is to have smaller square footages in construction. So those things are in this bill, the Choice Act. And I'd like to invite my good friend Spencer Fry up to make any comments he'd like to make about it before we take any questions.
Yes, sir. Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Washburn. Don't let him fool you. He's been working on this a whole bunch. We definitely are in a housing crisis. It hadn't stopped. Housing prices from 2020 to 24 have gone up about 35%. If you look at the starter home price in the state of Georgia, it's $350,000. If you take an 80-20 mortgage, you're going to be asked to put up $70,000 to cover that 80-20 mortgage, and then you're going to have $280,000 left over, which means you got to make, at today's rates, about 1%, which is going to be $2,800 to cover your mortgage and your taxes and insurance, which means that you got to make at least $9,000 a month in order not to be housing stressed at $2,800 a month. And there's not but maybe 15% of the population that's at that income level in this state. I come to you as a licensed contractor for the past, I don't even know how long, when the legislature made us get licenses, and been building for about 25 years. And I work for an organization whose main goal is to create simple, decent housing for folks through home ownership. I've seen the way the home ownership can impact people's lives. But even more than that, I've seen the way that their lives can be impacted when they don't pay all of their money towards rent or a mortgage. And over in Athens, what we figured up is we free up about $800 a month in income for our families that we do business with. And that's based on market-based rents and their current rents that they're paying before they enter in the program. And I haven't studied this, but I will guarantee you that that $800 is spent within 5 miles of that front door on health care, on student needs. One thing that we found out when we did a statewide study is the educational factors of other adults in the house are also expanded, and that was out of the blue. So what we wanted to do is, understanding that the municipalities and the counties have a great task. They're closer to the voters than we are. They hear more from the voters than anybody, and not wanting to create any sort of preemption requirement, because Georgia is a diverse state. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. And we want to give everybody the opportunity to do the right thing for the people in their communities. And this is a market-based solution. The only way we're going to get ourselves out of this is if we put more units in the market. And putting more units in the market will potentially stabilize, or eventually, if we can do it quick enough, lower the price of housing. And it's going to make a big difference in the people's lives in this state. This is one of the things that I've seen that we can do to make a big change in some folks' lives that we don't even know. Now, I can go through the bill line by line. I think a lot of y'all are familiar with it, but essentially came up with the idea from Montana. Had to redo, they had to actually enable their zoning codes in the whole state. And so through this, they decided to create a menu of options for people to choose from. And now we took that menu, expanded it, 2.5 decades of different code issues that we've encountered. And I'm not talking about quality code. I'm talking about house size, footprints of the house. I would never live in a 400 square foot house, but some people want to. But in Athens, Clarke County, I know you can't build lower than 600. Why is that? Well, that's a random number that they came up with apartment complexes when they were building apartment complexes back in the day. It's not really based on any sort of science. It's not based on anything except for a person's individual idea of what they might like to live in. Also, lot sizes. You know, and I can only speak to my area that I serve. We're looking at 5,000 square foot minimums on a lot. But a 2,500 square foot lot could hold a 400 square foot house, and you could get two 2,500s out of one 5,000. Two different residences could potentially be made where there was only one in the past. And by creating a menu of items for municipalities, government subdivisions to choose from, and offering them incentives towards grants that the processes are already set up, and creating identifiers on how much a community is going to work to solve these issues for their citizens, it will incentivize them to qualify for grants at the state, whether it's DCA, CDBG Home, GFA grants, potentially LMIG funding grants. And the counties that want to do this, do it. And then everybody who doesn't want to do it, doesn't do it. And it's not a mandate. It's merely a choice. We've named it the Choice Act because it stands for Community Housing Options, Increased Cost Efficiency. And we have to do something for the people in this state. And we feel like that we've worked with all the parties involved, and there's going to be a few dissenters, I understand, but nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect. And we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater? You know, bad water. Point is, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, I think is what we like to say down here. And this isn't by any means a magic bullet. This isn't going to magically solve the problem. But for the next 2 years, every governmental subdivision in this state and every elected official in this state will be discussing housing and zoning, which I think will give us an incredible opportunity to ease some of the financial pressures off the citizens in this state. I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, are there any questions on the part of the committee for Representative Fry? Okay, we have one. Chairwoman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see a lot of good things in this bill, but I do have some concerns. You have a minimum size of 1,200 square feet. I think it's line 192. And then down further on this page, it talks about being able to build a duplex in the same lot. So you could have in a residential neighborhood and somebody next door could build duplexes. Is that part of what this bill is doing?
Well, that is one of the choices that a local municipality could choose. It's not a mandate.
Okay, it would be up to the local zoning to still say yes or no to
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And if the local folks wanted their mayor and commission to allow for duplexes to be built in a single-family zoning category, that would be a local decision.
Okay, if you have an existing home and there happens to be a lot next door, all the other houses are residential, single, they could say, okay, now anybody can build a duplex wherever they want, or would they have to accept the zoning for that particular neighborhood? The same thing you talk about cottages, I assume
Yes,
that's going to
ma'am.
be small mini houses, a cottage and a cottage courtyard?
So one of the things is that this is a list of they've been changed a couple times, so I think it's about 40 things. Mm-hmm. And they only have to choose 10, and they don't have to choose the other 30. And so depending on which ones they would like to choose and whichever ones would fit their community is what we would encourage them to do. So what Fulton County picks is going to be different from Brunswick, is going to be different from Rome, depending on how the folks feel in that area and the rapport and that they have with their elected officials that are going to be making these decisions.
And it would apply then to the whole community, whatever the county or the city chooses?
Yes, ma'am, because that's where we wanted to maintain their authority, because that's the municipalities, the counties and the cities' authority is the zoning. So we don't want to tell anybody how they have to run their county. But we do need to say, hey, we all need to be talking about this in a way that we can make some positive changes.
Thank you.
Okay, Chairman LaHood.
Thank you, and I appreciate the intent of the bill to make housing more accessible to people who are seeking that home ownership status. And so if I understand right, the bill creates basically three options for local government to become designated as one of these three options. And it looks like workforce housing ready is one of them, and maybe the lower on the three tiers, the easiest to meet the requirement. The next is workforce housing ready expert, and then the third, workforce and home ownership leader. And am I right that out of the 40 or so criteria that you're giving them to choose from, they, depending on how many they agree to adopt into their policies, would determine which of these statuses they get?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And the I guess the workforce and home ownership leader status is the highest one, and the way I'm reading it. And what are the benefits of that? Can you just explain the benefit of them adopting these criteria?
So
what do they get from DCA if they do this? Because I want to make it clear, I don't see any mandates for any local government here. These are optional.
That's right. That's right. So it's an optional bill. Basically, if you get to the 10, the lowest certification, you can apply for any grants you feel like applying for around the state. With DCA would be a home, which is a housing type of grant from the federal. It's federal pass-through. CDBG money, that's federal pass-through. Going up to the next level, you choose 15 policies. You get a little more incentives. You get preference over anyone who only has 10 policies if you're facing the grant competition directly with them. And you would also get preferential, I say points, but we're just saying it's preference to GFA, which would be some solar grants, some infrastructure grants, and then the highest tier would allow you preference over any other city municipalities that had the same grant level as you or lower, but then you would potentially not have to match your LMIG money, meaning that it's a really major incentive for communities to really focus on their housing, and it gives them something to work for.
So if I can ask another question, who would designate the local government as achieving this status? Would DCA kind of crown them as one of these tiers?
That's a great question. So I've really tried to make this a revenue neutral situation without having to staff DCA any extra, without having to put any extra work on the counties except for looking at their local zoning ordinances. And so, normally we don't try to tell the departments how to implement a plan. My suggestion is that every county attorney, every city attorney would send in an affidavit to DCA saying that they did 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, whatever they did. And then that affidavit by that county attorney, I would imagine is going to be pretty tight. I don't think they're going to try to fool anybody when they do an affidavit. And it would be policed through the Home Builders Association, the real estate agents, because I just got through being past president of the Athens area home builders, and I've heard about this stuff since I was a member 20 years ago. And then the president, you hear a lot about it. We hear about it all over the state. And so I think it would be a self-reporting and a self-policing way to implement this, where we're not trying to cost anybody any money. And if it doesn't work, we can come back and enforce it. But I have faith that our communities are going to really take this seriously and do a good job of it.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to grant a little bit of chair privilege here and allow someone who is up here on our next subcommittee, Representative Roberts, to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, and I haven't studied this in detail. I'm trying to digest it all, but you know I love any ideas where we can increase our housing supply. My question is, if a county decides that they want to go for the 15 one, are they changing their zoning code to allow for those before they go and apply for these grants? After? Like, what is the timeline there?
So what I've tried to do is put in a 2-year implementation period. So everybody's got 2 years. All
2
right?
years from the time they apply for the grants?
Well, from when we start the bill, right? So when the bill is enacted, if it gets passed and signed by the governor, we got 2 years, the shot clock starts to tick. You can apply for 1 million grants before that, nothing changes. After 2 years, we figured we'd give people enough time to really digest this and work on it. And then the 2 years is when the tier level kicks in for priority over other communities that may not have tried to choose anything.
Okay, but none of this eliminates the requirement that they have to do a text amendment through their normal processes, correct?
No, that's correct. That is
Okay.
correct. So
I guess I'm trying to figure out when the time, so if I want these grants, but I may not want to change my text until I know I've got the grants, like what is, do you
it's not a, you change the text and then you receive priority with your grant application when you apply down the road.
Got it.
So it's not a,
So they have to change it first and then they apply for the grant?
yes, ma'am.
Okay,
It's
got it.
certification process where
Thank
they
you.
send the affidavit in and then there'll be the priority standards over.
Got it. Thank you.
Representative Bazemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I want to thank Chairman Washburn for having the study committee so that you revealed to those of us that did not know there was a crisis that there was. And thank you for allowing me to sit on that. And the conversation that continued after that, not just the study committee, but a whole year or so after, and my colleague, that we continued the conversation. And every entity that came together after this. And so my question is every entity that you noted, are they in support of this bill?
So, okay, like entity, I don't really know the definition of entity, but I think that 5 out of the 6 folks have actually had an official vote and taken a position, an official position for.
Okay.
And I think that's very important to point out is that we're not here trying to tell everybody what to do. And when I met with the group and presented it to them, they were all very open, and everybody wants to solve the problems of the people of the state. And each individual group had a line item veto. And this legislation, aside from one line, and I'd have to look it up to tell you where it is exactly the same document that they all agreed to, or at least didn't vote to veto any lines out of. And I think that that's a very important point to bring up.
And I thank you so much again for the work that you two have done on this bill, and I am in total support of it. And we know that this is optional. That's what's good. Well, because when we pass legislation, it is not normally.
That's right.
So, thank you.
Ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And right now I see no further questions. So
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Fry, Representative Washburn. And we'll move on to those who have signed up to speak. And we've been notified that some of these are going to be in groups. So the first group I'd like to call up is our group associated with ACCG. That would be Mr. Todd Edwards, Carlotta Harrell, and Mr. Chris Dockery. And we will let y'all proceed as as you deem necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, I'm Todd Edwards with ACCG. We too, as a group, as an association, and as members of the aforementioned task force, have worked long and diligently on the housing issues facing Georgia. We did participate in those 5 meetings over a summer period. There were several proposals put forward. We had a list of best practices that ACCG did vote, our policy council, in support of, which has many other provisions that are not in front of you today. The Choice Act has been presented to our council, policy council, on a few occasions. We have not yet taken a vote. However, we have had some spirited discussion. You'll hear some of it from 2 of our policy councils in just one moment. I guess I'll just go ahead and pass it over to y'all. Do y'all have a preference on which? So first is Chairman Chris Dockery from Lumpkin County. He served on our housing task force in 2023, has been very involved, and is a current member of ACCG's policy council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for taking time to hear from us, and I want to voice a couple of concerns. Again, I'm Chris Dockery. I'm the chairman of the Board of Commissioners in Lumpkin County, and I too am a licensed contractor. I have been for 28 years in North Georgia. Every county in the state of Georgia is vastly different, all 159 counties. And it's not one size fits all. The topography is different. The demographics are different. The desires of the people who live in those communities are certainly different. In Lumpkin County, we don't have a Rivian. We don't have a Kia, a Caterpillar, or a Hyundai. We just don't have those things. The topography would not allow those things in our community. But what we do have is a rich history of gold. The state capital here, that gold come from Lumpkin County, and we're certainly proud of that. We have a lot of people that visit our community because of our history. And we also have a strong agritourism business, which requires a lot of rural land. People also come to the mountains to enjoy our national forest, our creeks, our waterfalls. So Lumpkin County is vastly different than a lot of counties in Georgia. The representative he made note that the housing market was up 25%. I can certainly attest to that when I see prices today. But I would also say that other commodities are up extremely high. If you look at the Consumer Price Index, you'll see that everything is up. And I'm concerned that the incentives might not have the desired effect, given the fact that everything is up due to inflation. Again, we mentioned that Georgia is a very diverse state. I think that was the representative's words, that it was very diverse and that all the counties are different. When I read through the Choice Act, there were some things that I thought were good and that could add benefit. Things like streamlined permitting, accessory dwellings, and then just allowing the building materials that are in the International Residential Code to be used instead of local amendments to those things. As a builder, those are things that I think are very beneficial. But I think there are some bad things. We recently went back and did some studies and revisions on our land use regulations, and overwhelmingly, my constituents, and probably some of your constituents as well, said, we don't want this high-density housing. We don't want this in our community. It's not, we want setbacks. We want you to make our setbacks greater, not less or zero, so it doesn't fit every community. You say that it's not mandated, that these are optional, but I would say that if you don't, then you're at an extreme disadvantage as a community to receive any funding from the state of Georgia. We mentioned DCA funding. We used a CDBG grant to improve our senior center. So you're telling me that if I don't accept high-density housing, that I might not be eligible, or that I would certainly be way down the list as it relates to any CDBG funding. LMIG. Our voters understand the importance of sales tax. We understand the importance of our tourism-based economy. That's the reason we enacted a T-SPLOST. That's the reason we enacted a SPLOST, because we understand the importance of those sales tax dollars. So we use our T-SPLOST money to help leverage more local maintenance and improvement grants from the Department of Transportation. And you're telling me that if we don't adopt these policies, one of these tiers, that we're not going to be considered favorably as it relates to maintaining our roads that not only our citizens use, but is vital to our economy, which is based on tourism, agritourism. So I think you also have to look at the GFA. You know, we mentioned the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority and preferential treatment to those communities who did adopt regulations that promote high-density housing. We need GFA in our community. We're currently using a GFA loan to expand our sewer infrastructure for economic development along for the 400 corridor, which is our primary area for commercial and retail growth. So those are still important to us, even though we don't want that high-density housing. So as you look at this legislation, I would just urge you to look at it from the point that you say that it's not mandatory. But if we're going to keep pace with other communities as it relates to state funding, then it is mandatory. Or we're going to be left behind, and we're not going to be considered for that additional funding from state agencies. So again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you, and I'll certainly be available if anybody has any questions.
I have some packets that I would like to, for each of you all to have. So good afternoon. My name is Carlotta Harrell, and I am the chairwoman of the Henry County Board of Commissioners. While I appreciate the intent of this legislation, the Choice Act has the potential to significantly hurt citizens of Georgia. To be clear, Henry County currently meets many of the planning and zoning policies required for the preferred designation. That said, I am not in support of any legislation that hinders any county's ability to apply for and receive grant funding. These so-called incentives will cripple county governments. Density does not create housing affordability. There is no evidence of this to be true. We've built over 3,000 multifamily units in the last 2 years, and the rent start at $1,700 a month. Governments without the capacity to implement and enforce these requirements are often the ones that need it the most, especially our rural and small communities. These critical funds are used to enhance needs such as access to clean drinking water, affordable housing, and food. A primary concern is the impact on public safety. As a former Henry County police officer, I've seen how flag lots can impact the ability for safe and effective fire and law enforcement response, especially when it comes to fire engines being able to access structures on these lots. 3 additional concerns of this legislation. Separate government organs such as water authorities, which I have a water authority in my county, could lose out on funding opportunities based on policies and ordinances that they do not control. The impact to home rule by dictating zoning types, and the potential impact for all state grants. Specific organizational impacts include pressure to issue permits simply to meet a deadline, unrestricted occupancy of single-family homes, which has both public safety and public health implications, and finally, it can cause major issues regarding public notice and procedural requirements related of OCGA 36-66-48 by allowing duplexes, townhomes, or multifamily structures in existing single-family zones. Would you want a multifamily structure in your neighborhood? Would you like the character of your neighborhood change? Again, our communities are not a one-size-fits-all. Stop trying to make it that way with this legislation, as is written today. This is a mandate because it is tied to funding. And for the Home Builders Association to be the one that oversee it, that's a for-profit entity. And that should not be the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll close out. Appreciate both of y'all coming up today and taking y'all's time to listen to it. We know it's not a mandate up front. It is optional for local governments, but as you see it, they feel that they're going to be unfairly disadvantaged by not getting the preferential treatment. A lot of the county folks live in dense areas. They like it. If they didn't do it, or less dense areas, excuse me, if they didn't do it, they'd be voted out of office. And what we've learned also in recent years is when counties do in the metro area try to attempt more density, more multi-family housing, they also have to consider the feelings of those neighborhoods and whether or not a new city may or may not be created by those within their communities that do not like the density that they've voted on. And that's also a constant influence on county decisions and what we hear on our board back at ACCG. So it's kind of you're between a rock and a hard place. Do you do density, face that the polls are a new city, or do you not, and keep everyone happy in that particular area? So appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to the county's comments, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions on the part of the committee? Seeing none, thank you all. Safe travels. Okay, next we're going to call up a group that, the next group, we'll call this the Realtors group, but it's actually Betsy Bradford from the Realtors, Austin Hackney from the Home Builder Association, Noah Renitz for GMA, and I believe Mr. David Rayner from the Georgia Chamber. Oh, I'm sorry. And kind of written in on the side here, we have Cindy also. We'll let y'all go ahead. Betsy, if you would like to go ahead, just each of you introduce yourself as you present.
Yes,
and proceed at your discretion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having us here today. I am Betsy Bradfield. I am the Advocacy Director for the Georgia Association of Realtors. And we formed this task force about a year ago after session last year, after we all sat down and agreed that we needed to do something on housing. We are at a crisis level in the state of Georgia. Our current average sales price is $400,000, and that's up $30,000 from this time last year. It's not getting better. It's only getting worse. As the realtors, we support access to housing. We think it's a really issue for people getting their first house, so your first-time home buyers, and people who are trying to find their last house. So these are individuals who are trying to downsize. Right now, the market is broken. The housing churn, where you have, a family purchasing a larger house and then a small family moving into that house and having that churn where you move up price points, it's just not happening right now because people are not incentivized to sell their home, and there is nothing that they can buy in their price range. You would essentially be losing money to buy a smaller house and downsize. So we are here to support the task force. We met several times across the state, and each of our groups had veto power, as mentioned, could request changes along the way. We all had at least 3 to 5 members on the task force from our associations, not just staff. It was actually our individual association members. And everyone was in agreement that this was the way forward. So we are happy to present this to you. And if you have any questions, we'll all be available.
Thank you, Betsy.
Good afternoon, subcommittee members. Chairman Anderson, Noah Reynolds with the Georgia Municipal Association, and I'm here today speaking in support of House Bill 1266. If I could, I'd like to take a moment and recognize where we stand today. 1 year ago, almost to the day, I was before this subcommittee speaking against House Bill 517. This was an uber preemptive bill relating to housing. And this is how far we've come in a year, is that I'm able to stand here today with the realtors, the home builders, and representatives from the chamber in support of a housing package. And it's because that housing package is local option. There's been a lot of good discussion here today and a lot of good points that have been raised about how we can address housing in the state of Georgia and how we can derive a more cost-effective unit for either workforce housing or for the first-time home buyer. And I can tell you this. Last year, when we died, GMA goes and hits the road. We go meet with all of our member cities across the state of Georgia. In all 12 districts that we went to, housing affordability, housing supply was one of the predominant concerns in every single district across the state of Georgia. And I can tell you this, the manner by which that is going to be addressed is going to be different for every single city. I don't need to enumerate those concerns for you here today. I believe what this legislation allows for municipal governments to do is to pick and choose from a menu of options that we hope will work to decrease the cost basis for new development in the state of Georgia for residential housing. Chairwoman Taylor, you mentioned earlier one of the provisions about upzoning, this idea of allowing for a duplex in single-family residential property. That's not going to work in every single jurisdiction. That's not going to work in every community. But I have cities currently that have that on the books, that allow for duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes to be built in single-family neighborhoods. I would assume a lot of communities wouldn't pick that. I have a lot of communities that have a single-family square footage minimum set at 1,200 square feet. I have communities with numbers below that. They're going to meet some of these qualifications, and this legislation sets guardrails for what they can set out to achieve to have the option to receive some of these funding opportunities we've identified at a higher clip, at a higher priority. The state has made unprecedented levels of investment into housing and infrastructure over the past number of years. $250 million to the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority this year, $90 million in the Governor's Workforce Housing Trust Fund. If the state is going to be allocating these dollars, which each of you are playing a role in this process, we believe that this legislation here today helps channel some of those funds to pro-housing communities that are looking to enact some of these choices. So with that being said, I'm happy to take any questions. I know the hour is light. We've been in this room for a long time. I'm happy to take any questions, but I will turn it over to one of my colleagues here to speak on the bill as well. But thank you, and I urge your support on the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. David Rayner with the Georgia Chamber. I want to first thank the leadership of Chairman Washburn and Representative Fry for bringing this bill forward. This is a product of work from the interim with these stakeholder groups. I will say from the business community's perspective, one of the most pervasive challenges that we see in this state is workforce shortages. And a key element to solving these workforce shortages is workforce housing and providing a mechanism to build more homes to increase inventory throughout the state. What we hear from our members, from employers and employees alike, that employees want to live in the communities in which they work. And we feel that this legislation is a tool in the toolbox, similar to House Bill 514 that came through this committee last year, just to provide us with some tools to enhance that housing inventory. So I would submit to you today that the status quo is unsustainable at this point, and I would just commend the bill for your favorable consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Austin Hackney with the Home Builders Association. My colleague Cindy Morley is here to also support this bill. From our perspective as the builders in the field putting the houses in the dirt, these policies, these local options are effective and valid. They come from states all over the country, from communities all over the state. Here, we have seen how these policies work in the field. They're all useful. There's no fluff on this list. And I do want to reassure or correct maybe a misunderstanding that the Home Builders Association has no police power at all under this bill or otherwise. I think Representative Fry's comments were more to the effect that, of course, our builder members are involved in the community and they know what policies are being enforced and what aren't. So to that end, of course, we're not going to police this program as home builder associations, but we do see what's effective and what works, and these policies come from places that have implemented them already, and they have a track record of success. So happy to answer any questions about any of the specific policies. But my last point, I think, is if you don't like one of them on the list, then it's obviously not right for you or your community. And luckily, there are dozens of others left on the list to choose from, and they're all useful and effective. So we would urge favorable consideration of this bill to move through the process. There's obviously a long implementation period to get it on the books and to get it enforced and to have it effective. But the housing crisis is not going away unless we do something about it. So this is a great bite at the apple, and appreciate your support.
Hi, I'm Cindy Morley with Home Builder Association with Austin, Chairman, committee members. In respect of your time, I believe everything that has been said that I would need to say, so thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Is there any questions for this panel as of the committee? I see none. Thank you all. Last that we have on the list to speak to this bill is Miss Elizabeth Apley. You may proceed at your pleasure.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Elizabeth Apley. I'm here representing Presbyterians for Better Georgia, Georgia Advancing Communities Together, House ATL, 9 to 5 Georgia, the Georgia Supportive Housing Association, and Enterprise Community Partners. I want to thank the author of the bill and Representative Fry for their hard work and the work of the task force. You've heard me speak many times in many committees on behalf of these groups about the need for increased access to affordable housing in Georgia, and that means density and an end to what is often described as exclusionary zoning. So this bill is an important step in that regard. It's needed, as the findings in the legislation say, to increase the supply of affordable housing in the state by encouraging local governments to adopt policies and reforms that will promote the construction of affordable housing, reduce the burden of outdated policies and regulation on housing construction and the cost of housing to Georgia citizens. So we thank you and urge your favorable consideration.
Okay, does the committee have any questions, Ms. Apley? Seeing none, okay. I think, is there anyone else that we missed that may have signed up or would like to speak to this bill? I see no hands, so we are going to do this as a hearing. The bill will be subject to be called up in full committee tomorrow, so this will proceed from there. Thank you, representatives. Now we're going to move on to our last bill. Mr. Chairman Tyler Paul Smith, if you'd like to come and speak with us regarding House Bill 1228, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank y'all for putting us down on the agenda today. Today I present to you House Bill 1228. This bill would propose to extend to local governments the current requirement for state agencies to utilize qualifications-based selection for the selection of architectural and engineering firms. This would provide numerous qualitative analysis numerous qualitative analyses have found that qualifications-based selection, or QBS, which I'll try to use a little bit more instead of being so slow with pronunciating all that for you. This consistently yields the best results for the project owner and ultimate end user, as well as decreasing unforeseen cost, and promotes scheduled adherence. This would propose the following: that it defines local government as any county, municipality, or consolidated government, defines professional services as the practice of architecture, professional engineering, or landscape architecture. This requires that local governments adhere to the qualifications-based selection process defined elsewhere in the code. That would be OCGA 50-22-1 through 9. QBS, just so you know, is the process of procuring architectural and engineering services through assessing the qualifications of a firm before negotiating that cost. Price negotiations may commence with the highest ranked responder after firms are ranked highest to lowest based on qualifications. If a satisfactory agreement cannot be reached with the highest ranked firm, negotiations may be terminated and begin with the next highest ranked firm, and so on. This would allow local governments to commence negotiations after the closure of the advertised response period for professional services, even if the entity only receives one proposal. It would prohibit local governments from requiring cost estimates during the proposal process prior to negotiations with the highest ranked firm. This bill would also clarify that any on-demand services contract does not require a subsequent RFQ process so long as the firms are selected by utilizing QBS. This would allow a local government to utilize a firm with which it has an existing relationship with so long as that provider is technically competent. This requires a local government to utilize competitive selection if the project is estimated to have a cost in excess of $1 million or the cost of professional services is estimated to be in excess of $75,000. So just in your mind, think about this. $75,000 is usually that threshold amount for transportation projects if you need something to visualize when looking through this. This bill states that all projects, including public works and transportation projects, are required to utilize QBS for the selection of architectural or engineering firms and services. That, in essence, Mr. Chairman, is the bill. I have Ms. Christie with me here today, and she is a subject matter expert, so if it would be okay with the chairman and the committee, I'd like to call her up as my phone a friend option. I'll use this comparison. I used this with a client yesterday and trying to land them. I used Carhartt and Walmart brand Wrangler jeans. No offense to Walmart. I posit this question. Your Wranglers that you may buy from Walmart may last through that hard manual labor job for about a week. And then you're going to find out that after wear and tear and washing and drying, they're not going to last very long. You take those Carhartts, that could be a $20 to $30 difference. And you'll find that you very well could be wearing those same Carhartts 15 years later. I can say that from experience. And so I would say this, right now what we have is a low bid process. That's not always going to yield the proper quality that we need. We ran into some of this in Carroll County years ago when we built a new courthouse under this same process. I wish we'd had QBS